Hund in den Hintergrund. Der Broadcast is live.
Yeah. Hello, hello, hello. I think according to the little eye icon in the top left corner, we currently have 0 eyeballs on us, but hello to the universe. I know you're all desperately trying to log on to Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook, and we hope that we will be a sufficient replacement for your evening entertainment. With me, I have Manuel Veth from Transfermarkt. Manuel, where are you right now? Tell us where you're located.
I'm back on the West Coast after spending 2 weeks in Germany, back with my family, out of my COVID exile, as I like to call it, now back on the West Coast in Victoria, British Columbia. So, yeah.
Nice.
So,
nice.
full North American gang.
Yeah, I mean, that includes me, I hope, because I'm in New York, where not only are social media down, but after some beautiful days of early fall, it's pouring rain. And you get real kind of end of the world vibes. So, yeah, you were recently, Manuel. You were recently in England. Sorry, I was going to say England, in Germany. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to be. I mean, I went back to see family, right? My mom, my dad, my sister, they still live there, and so being able to see them again, as most people know, COVID within Canada are not strict, but to get into Canada is quite difficult, and getting out of Canada was quite difficult for some time as well. And even though our vaccination rate, I think, is the highest now among all G7 countries in the world, but it still means that Canadians are very careful when it comes to allowing travel in and out. So most restrictions are now lifted for those who are double vaxxed. So I was able to go home, which was nice, into a completely different world when it comes to restrictions, and much more open than it is here in some ways. And being able to go back to stadiums to do a big part of my job is to go to football games, and being able to do that again was very nice. And I was able to see 3 live games in the short period I was there. Going back in December, a lot more scheduled for then. But 3 games in 12 days, I think, is quite good. Saw Bayern Munich twice live in the Allianz Arena, then in Fürth against Kräuter Fürth. And those who follow me on Twitter know Bayern Munich is kind of one of the big clubs that I cover, because I am originally from Munich, and I have family connections there, and I spend a lot of time there. And I know most people that cover the club closely as well. So being able to actually do my job was nice. And I also went to Salzburg, which is another club that I cover quite closely. I have family connections just outside of Salzburg, on the German side of the border, in Bad Reichenhall. And we've done quite a few of interviews with RB Salzburg, right? Spoke to Karim Adeyemi a few times. Jesse Marsch, who's of course now in Leipzig, is someone we've interviewed. We did Brendan Aronson, who's still playing for Salzburg. So that was one of the reasons I went to that game as well. And going to Austria, I tell you, apparently COVID is over in Austria. So that was a shocking experience, because those who are familiar with the German-Austria border, is you essentially, some of the villages are split half-half, right? Some of the towns are half Austrian, half German, and you just walk across the street, and all of a sudden you're in completely different rules and a different setup. But that's Europe. And it was nice, but still, the entire experience was really nice to be back and to actually be able to do a big part of my job again. It was fantastic.
Yeah. So to those who maybe don't know you and still for some reason clicked on this stream, it might be a little confusing that you're from Munich and now you're in Canada working for a German company, but reporting in English. Can you give us your little spiel about how that all came to be and what your job is now?
Oh man, yeah, it's such a long story. My mom is originally from here, from Victoria, so I'm very fortunate to have dual citizenship. I grew up in both countries, and until I was 17, mostly lived in Munich. Then came over here for high school, did my first part of university education here in Canada as well, and then went to the Netherlands and then the UK, where I did my PhD. And while I was doing my PhD in football and economics in the post-Soviet space, I started with this journalism thing. and started writing as a freelancer in football journalism, and dabbled mostly in football economics. And then at some point I moved back here to Canada because my wife is from here. We have a property right on the West Coast, so it kind of makes sense to live here and make this our home base. So I started covering Major League Soccer on top of the Bundesliga, and then Eastern European football is what I was doing as well. I covered the Russia World Cup in 2018, for example. And then about 2.5 years ago, Transfermarkt approached me because they were expanding in North America. They wanted to build something in North America, and they sort of said, "Oh well, we've been following you for a while. We really like what you're doing. We really like what you write. We really like what you offer in terms of the knowledge that you have. And wouldn't you want to become the area manager for Transfermarkt North America and sort of build something from the ground up?" Because Transfermarkt, those who are familiar with Transfer, I think everyone knows Transfermarkt, because if you Google a player, you will end up on Transfermarkt. That's just how it is, right? And they're very successful as a news source as well in Germany, and they have now, kind of carried it across the world. And the English content that is an important part of building towards the future. So that's my job now, to bring Transfermarkt, which is a very German news product, to the English-speaking world, and with a particular focus on North America.
Yeah, I mean, for those who, perhaps haven't yet Googled Kylian Mbappé and landed on Transfermarkt, there was recently a very flattering profile of the company in the New York Times, written by Rory Smith, one of the best soccer journalists in the world, and it was really incredible. Like the reach it has. It's not. I think of it as, Google if someone has a left foot or right foot. Like, when is the contract up? Who's the agent? That kind of thing. What's their transfer value? But these transfer values that, you can tell me about that, but from the outside it appears that Transfermarkt kind of because there's no objective way to do that. So there must be something that flows into it, but Transfermarkt determines how much a player is worth in the market. So that has to do with, typically his age, his position, the league in which he plays, how long his contract is, these kind of factors. I think sometimes even nationality, although we probably wouldn't like to admit that, but some nationalities are or more so what league they play in, I guess. And these values are quoted in courts, when there's litigation between, say, a club that went bankrupt but still owes a club a transfer fee, or when an agent is suing one of his former clients. And so this is, there's really this endless kind of demand for this type of information. I remember also, didn't Real Madrid sign a Japanese player a few years ago, and they was everyone Googled, they didn't realize that his contract was running out, but because everyone kept Googling it and finding the Transfermarkt, and then everyone got it wrong. I don't know if you can tell me about that, but maybe I'm misremembering.
I think we had the information, right? And if I could remember correctly, the contract was put in wasn't correct, and they actually went, and I think a bunch of the other clubs just basically went off the information that was on our side, which is curated. We have these admins all over the world, and they curate it for us, right? And I'm not, Japan isn't where I am based, but I can only tell you that we have to rely on sources like every as well, right? And if this contract runs that for this period of time, then that's what's in the bio. And sometimes we get it wrong, is because we have to be able to rely on it. Then in some cases clubs are quite open about it. And I work in Major League Soccer, for example, or in the Bundesliga, and you tell us how long a contract runs, right? Which is nice, because then it's easy for us to put it in. It gets more difficult when it comes to things like an exit clause, which is an information that we provide. And again, we have to rely on sources or what is being reported, either directly to us or in what we call reliable news sources. And we actually have an internal list of what we consider reliable or not. Like, your random blogger online, that's not a reliable source about a big news outlet. For example, if Kicker, for example, say it, or Süddeutsche Zeitung or Sportbild, we have various degrees of reliable or not in an internal ranking. How reliable we consider each source, but it does exist, and we pay very close attention to that. So we do recognize if something isn't right, and we the future. But yeah, it's a very extensive database, and we have a lot of information in there. And I would like to say that probably 80 to 90% of it is right. We're not perfect. We make mistakes like everyone else, but I think we pride ourselves very close to being accurate.
Yeah, it's definitely a very worthwhile service. And we're starting to get a few questions here, which is really fun. Keep them coming, everyone. So starting with Steve, who is actually somewhat like the creator of the Transfer Exchange, which hosts my show. He's asking about the player everyone's talking about, the German striker who Bayern, mistakenly let go of when he was 12 years old, and who now seems to be doing at RB or FC Salzburg or RB Salzburg what Erling Haaland did before him. And you mentioned that you've interviewed him. Can you speak a little bit about how that went, and where was the interview? How did that go down? Did you both wear face masks?
So I did not interview him personally. That was done by Transfermarkt. That's a while ago, actually, but we are in close contact with his camp. Mixed zones are an interesting one right now because they are not open yet, right? I took a photo in Fürth of what a mixed zone at the moment looks like. The players like walk down a long line, and there's boards in behind each player, and then you get to ask you questions, sort of, we assume, while you're sitting in the press box. So I have not personally interviewed Adeyemi. We have an interview with Adeyemi on Transfermarkt from a while ago. We are in contact with Adeyemi. I'm pretty sure we're probably going to do another, but probably not until he's at a new club. Look, when it comes to transfer rumors like this, Adeyemi, we reported that Barca and Liverpool were looking at him very closely, right? And we got that from a source that's very close to Adeyemi. Looking at a player and scouting a player is very different than actually signing a player, right? Transfers go through various stages. At first thing, the clubs are interested in a player, and then the next step is that they express an interest in the player, either via the agent, even though they're not supposed to do that, right? That happens. And then they go to the club, RB Salzburg, who own his rights, and there's no exit clause at the moment. Whether Liverpool in the end will sign him, I don't know. I cannot seriously answer that question. I cannot answer the question whether Barcelona will sign him. I cannot answer the question whether Bayern Munich will bring him back. He fell out that academy system. The coach in question is no longer there. It's a very difficult topic. Those who follow Bayern know that there have been some issues in the academy system.
Is this the same coach who was where there were screenshots of racial profiling, essentially, and like ridicule? Is this the same situation? I know there was
I'm not at liberty to talk about this, mostly for legal reasons. And it's not my story. It's not my story to tell. There was a couple other journalists that are very close to the story, and they have reported on the story. I like to be careful with this kind of stuff because it tends to blow back if it's wrong, right? So
totally, yeah.
I want to be careful with any kind of allegations and that kind of stuff. But there was difficulties with Adeyemi in the youth setup, and he did leave the club. He went to Unterhaching and Salzburg, where he's doing really well. And I think the way he's been playing, I think when Liverpool and Barcelona start looking at a player, they have serious reasons for that. And I think that Liverpool have a history of of going to Salzburg and taking those players, because the way Red Bull play, and I mean, in this case, we can actually call it Red Bull, but the Red Bull football, whether it's in New York, whether it's in Salzburg, whether it's in Leipzig, or now in Brazil in Bragantino, it does fit with that counter-pressing, high press that Jurgen Klopp likes to play in Liverpool, right? So when they have a player that they produce, I think then automatically they become interesting for clubs like Liverpool. That said,
and I mean, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that said, they're not going to be the only ones interested, for sure.
Yeah. I was just going to add to that that we've seen that example before with Naby Keita, leaving Leipzig to go to Liverpool, and then this summer Konate. So it's definitely a well-trodden path.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and generally, I guess, for Leipzig players heading to the Premier League, like with Timo Werner as well. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about how the mix zone looks. I was kind of picturing, at like horse races when you have the shutters and the horses wait in them, and it's like, and then they go. When you said about the glass walls, and then I guess there's probably still the barrier. Can you talk me maybe almost like chronologically from, I don't know, 2 hours before kickoff? Can you talk me through your recent experience in the Allianz Arena as a journalist and just what that looked like? Because I think most of our listeners, find it hard to wrap their head around how a journalist's day in a stadium would look even without a pandemic. Like a lot of people don't know what a mix zone is, or that Bayern Munich has like a catering essentially for journalists.
They used to.
But yeah, they used to. Okay, there you go. Okay, I'm glad I asked.
The pandemic has changed things, and I do believe that we are at the tail end of the pandemic, and things are getting better. I mean, the news today, for example, is that Bayern are going back to full capacity now, right? And a lot of other soccer teams in Germany are going down that path now, because they're bringing that allow for that, and then the hospitalization rate in Germany is very low, much lower than it is where we have higher vaccination rates, but less of a hospital capacity. For example, Germany is doing quite well at this stage of the pandemic. As to answer your question, it's an interesting one. So I got vaccinated here in Canada. And here comes the first problem with that we all have vaccination passports. I'm sure you have one because you live in New York. That's strict with this sort of stuff too. Yeah. Vaccination passports around the world cannot talk to each other. And so for me to enter the Allianz Arena, I was sent a ticket via QR code to my phone, which I can use to walk the press area, the media area, right? So you get through the first security checkup. They check your backpack because you need a backpack as a journalist. Your laptop and all that kind of stuff is in there, right? So they check that. They give you a little thing for your backpack, and then you go through. You go downstairs where the parking garage is, and there's a separate media entrance that leads into the Allianz Arena. And there you then scan your QR code. But then you're supposed to, after your QR code, you're supposed to scan your second QR code, which is either your vaccine passport, your QR code that says that you had it, right? Mm-hmm. Or that you were recently PCR tested. That's what they call in German these 3 Gs: getestet, genesen, geimpft, right? They're now going to 2G, which is genesen and geimpft, which means you had it or you were vaccinated. I love that in German all the words are the same, so you can just go 3G or 2G or 1G. Here in Canada, for example, we were 1G. Like, you're only allowed into a restaurant, a bar, a stadium if you're fully vaccinated, which is very different than back to Germany, where it's 2 or sometimes 3G. So yes, I got to the QR code with my ticket, and then I was like, okay, well, I can't scan my vaccination passport because it's not even Canadian, it's from British Columbia, the province I live in, right? Mm-hmm. Try scanning that, like it just won't read. So I had to then produce my little piece of paper, which is similar to your CDC piece of paper that you have, where it says you have 2 vaccinations and when you got them. And I showed that to
And then
the
it looks
security.
like it's from like that vaccination card. I don't know about yours, but mine looks like it's from like Ellis Island.
Yeah,
It is
same with
so
mine.
far, like so outdated. You know, it would be so easy to forge. Like you could forge it in like Microsoft Paint or literally use like a notepad, you know?
Yeah.
So like when you're
That's
talking about QR codes, I was like, what QR codes?
So in BC, we now have QR codes, gasp, and they're the only thing that gets you into restaurants. But we also have the paper version still that we used in the beginning, right? Which looks exactly what you just described, only that in the flip, like it's not black and white. The flip side has the colors of the province of British Columbia. So it's blue, yellow, and it's actually quite pretty, but it's handwritten. Like you and I could find a card like that and fill it out with like, it says Pfizer BioNTech, the date that you got it, and all that kind of stuff. Giving away my vaccination record here. I got BioNTech. But
yeah, so if anyone wants to forge Manuel's cards,
yeah,
you know, he just gave you the data.
So like I had to show them that, and that was, and I found out in Germany now that, you know, just showing them the card, they see it. The same in Salzburg. They wrote down the whether you were vaccinated or not to get into the stadium. So then you screw that, and then there comes the big room where there used to be catering, one of the best buffets that you ever can you imagine. What's the 5-star cook in Germany? He's from Bavaria.
Is it the Käfer?
No,
no.
He's quite fat. He does like,
I mean, I would hope so for a chef.
He does like these cooking shows, and he used to do catering. It's very
Melzer or something.
No. I forgot his name. It's not important. Our listeners won't know him anyways. But like the buffet was quite good at Bayern. Now they just give you like a little paper bag. It has a couple sandwiches in it, a bottle of water, an apple, and a corny snack, which is like a muesli snack, right? And you are only allowed to eat it in the stands, in the press tribune, which you don't need to wear a mask. Like once you're sitting in the press tribune, you're okay without a mask.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the day to day, and then so we watch the game. The press conference at the Allianz Arena with Julian Nagelsmann is in person. There is no mixed zone in the Allianz Arena at the moment. So mixed zone is where you can hang out and you can speak to the players. All have to walk through the mixed zone, and you can ask them questions once they walk through. Right. The only exception is Thomas Müller. He has found some kind of backdoor exit that he likes to use whenever they lose. So good luck to anyone finding him after the Frankfurt result. I've seen him sneak out that way many times. He goes back out on the field, and then there's a back door you can use, and then you can actually go through the media exit, so you avoid all the press. Sneaky guy, Thomas. So that's closed at the moment, I guess, because they don't have a workaround. In Fürth, I guess their post-match press conference for coaches, they don't have the kind of room. Like at the Allianz Arena, it's like the size of a cinema. It's huge. I think it has 350 seats. So they can spread out the journalists that are in, because that's restricted right now as well. Right? They only allow a restricted amount of journalism into the press and into the media area anyways, right? So it's spread out. Every fourth seat only is available to sit down. And Fürth, I guess they don't have that space. So you just log into Zoom, and then the players, they have this, it was really weird. Like it's described, like you described with horses. Like there's these like, you know, these unusual boards where the players stand in front and all the media stuff is in the back.
Yeah.
So like all
or
the
it's like,
sponsors.
is it like, you know, in like thrillers when people are visiting a loved one in jail and there's like
no, so it's open.
You like pick up the phone, like
it's open.
Yeah,
and
okay.
There's people. It's kind of off the main stand, and then the TV guys and the football club media, they're on the main stand, and they're holding down the microphone, which is like a 2 meter long on a 2 meter long pole, and they're holding it under the nose, and then the players are kind of like lined up talking to the different guys. I tweeted a photo of it. It's on my Twitter. I can retweet it maybe. It looked.
Yeah,
I was just
tag us and we'll retweet it.
it's very strange. And then like the other thing that they brought in various players to talk, we assume, with us as well from the press box. So yeah, it's different. I'm not a huge fan of the Zoom media calls. I like being able to of this. I like to be spontaneous and just being able to grab a player after the game. And I know, having done several games in the Bundesliga, I know which players are more talkative than others. And being able to, for example, one guy who's always good to talk to is RB Leipzig's Tyler Adams. You just know he's going to stop. He's going to stop, and he's going to tell you something good. But it has to be spontaneous, right? And like you don't get that with Zoom. Or like in Salzburg, for example, I would have loved to chat post game with Brandon Aronson, but it's not possible right now because again, like he's one of those young American kids, and they're quotable and they're very good, right?
Yeah.
So that's missing, but again, we're at the tail end of this, so I think it's coming to an end. I mean, like to give you another example, I do Major League Soccer games here, and we used to be able to go into the changing room here post game,
right? Like in the NBA.
And you can't do that at the moment. It's all Zoom, and the clubs kind of cater who they give you. And I think that's kind of convenient for them in some ways because
I was on the receiving end of that, actually. I went to some of the Brooklyn Nets Zoom conferences in January, February last season, when they had kind of like a bit of a rough spell. And it was not really, journalism, because they could choose. So they basically, it was always their TV provider of choice that got the first questions, and that was like in the contract. It's the same, in the Bundesliga with Sky, the local TV provider who airs most of the Bundesliga games, not all of them. They get the coach before the game, they get some players after the game, and then of course they're going to pick the people who they know are going to ask friendly questions. And it's a little dodgy because also you can't really ask follow-up questions because it's like, oh, you're on mute, So make of that what you will, I guess.
I have an opinion about this, and I think that clubs kind of like this. It gives them an opportunity to restrict us in some ways, and they can just use the pandemic as an excuse for it. So, I mean, the sooner this ends, the better, because you and I have a job to do. We exist to ask tough questions. We don't exist to just go to games. Like one of the reasons why I go to games is because you often find things out that you don't find out from a live broadcast. Like, I'm not going to the game because I want to watch a football game, because you learn things there that you would not learn watching from television. And and Zoom is exactly the same thing. Like you do not learn things you need to learn from going on Zoom, right? It's a very restrictive form of journalism, and I can't wait for that to be over, because like we need to be able to do our job.
Yeah. Now speaking of doing your job, we're getting kind of variations of the same question here. I'm going to blur in one, and then I'll kind of like give you my take on it. So you mentioned early on that you're in touch with the camp of Adeyemi, and I think the very best reporters in any sport, but especially in German soccer, are not the ones that sit in a digital newsroom, have like Bild open, have Transfermarkt open, have Kicker open, have Daily Mail open, have Twitter open, and wait for things to roll in. The best people are those who are on the phone all day, and not, Thomas Müller is probably, when there are 6 journalists and he does decide to walk through the mixed zone, he's not going to give you, he's not going to give you like exclusives with like 100 people staring him down. And, you often don't hear it from the horse's mouth. Everyone can kind of imagine that agents like to talk, and I guess you always have to take that with a pinch of salt, because they want to position, they might be like, oh yes, my client, Guido Burgstaller in the 2nd division. Yeah, Real Madrid is interested in him. Are you going to report that? Maybe not a good idea. But I mean, can you, I was like, I guess almost putting myself in your footsteps there. So I don't want to answer for you. Can you let us in? Obviously, you don't have to mention players' names or camps or whatever, but just generally speaking, when you or Transfermarkt does break some news, like this club is pursuing this player, this guy has extended his contract, what kind of leads to that?
Oh, what do you mean our sources are? Or
yeah, just, I mean, is it the kind of thing where people will try and contact you and be like, oh, I have a bit of information that you might be interested in, or do you Google the agency of a player?
Oh, so it depends, right? We get approached with information, and you mentioned it already. Agents do like to talk. You have to be careful with that information sometimes, right? Because it's in the best interest of agents to be being talked about, right? And to be linked to various clubs. There was one player this year who was linked to various big clubs around Europe, and in the end, didn't go to any of them, right? We were told various times that this player was going to sign for this big club, and then that big club, and this big club, and at first we were like, "Oh, this is great," and then we quickly realized that we were being used, right?
Right.
So, and that happens. No ill feelings. We benefited from it as much as the other side does sometimes. But you need to, be careful about what you learn. In other instances, you would have a other agency reporting something, or you see something on Twitter, and then you're like, this is interesting. Let's just call a few people and see what they can tell you about this, whether that's a sporting director of the club, a head coach of the club, or maybe his agent. And most of the time it gets poo-pooed, and then we ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like, well, yeah, you do some digging there. This could be interesting. It's not entirely true, but it could be interesting. And then you're like, there's actually a story there, right? And then you look more into it, and you call some other people that you know. And it really depends. I mean, like, we do also do reporting where we completely rely on other people's information. Like, we do say reported by ESPN. Like, for example, just now I did an article on Araujo joining the Mexico team, right? And that's reported by Jeff Carlisle from ESPN. I don't need to add to that. I mean, Jeff Carlisle is one of the best network people in US soccer news. Like, why would I make an extra call if I know his source is reliable, right? And then I just add our typical Transfermarkt twist where I say, like, oh, he's one of the most valuable players playing in Major League Mexican players playing in Major League Soccer, and like make sure that people can find content that maybe only we have, right? But the best transfer news are those that we have exclusively ourselves. And it's hard to always be right. But I do think, again, we are quite often right because we know how to talk to the right people. That doesn't mean it ends up like that way. A great example was Joaquino Wijnaldum, who was linked to PSG, Bayern, and Barcelona, right? And his agent talked to all three and signed the best deal in the end. Like, my information at one point was that the deal was done with Bayern Munich, and that got in the end poo-pooed by Hasan Salihamidzic. And then last week there was an interview by Wijnaldum where he said, "Yeah, we're quite close." So I'm like, I told you. I told you this was going on. Like, and then, like, of course it fell through, and people were like, "You're wrong. You know nothing." And I'm like, he just confirmed it. Like, last week, he confirmed it in an interview himself. Like, yes, it didn't turn out that way, but things changed. So
Gotta do a little plug here for my colleagues Kieron and Steve from the Transfer Exchange Show, who, they work with Nathan Ellington, the former Man United player, and we have a great team, and they're very well connected within England. They have especially well connected at United, Arsenal, and Tottenham, and they're kind of raving about you right now because it's a hustle. It's not easy. You do get bullshitted by people. Like you said, you get used by people. People are very self-important. They're like, oh, I chatted with Christian Eriksen at the beach and he told me this and this, and you're like, okay, congratulations.
That's not a source.
Exactly.
that's not a source.
I know. It's the reason I mentioned that is because that was like, clearly I just made that up, but I think the reason why I thought of Christian Eriksen is because my parents actually saw him vacationing on the Amalfi Coast this summer after everything that happened at the Euros. And when it was still not clear, if he was going to be able to go back to Inter. So, these are like humans after all, and they also have families and have to think about schools for their kids, and if their wife or girlfriend or partner is going to be happy wherever they go. And I think sometimes we forget that a little bit, that aspect of it all.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's fascinating what you said about Wijnaldum there, because I think there was a time in the summer when everyone kind of thought he was either going to go to Barcelona or Bayern, the two FCBs. And then he did not, and it's kind of a little bit like dating, I guess, when you have different men or women pursuing you, and it might look like there's a front runner, but then, there could be an upset victory in the game, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, that's all fascinating stuff. We're also getting some questions here, and I think you're very well positioned to talk about this, on young American players. And I was watching some of the games on Saturday, and I realized just how many Americans are now in the Bundesliga.
That's crazy.
And how many have used it as a launch pad and are now like in in La Liga, in Serie A, and in the Premier League. And it's like just out of players that have been in Germany, you could make a whole US national team, essentially. And it just does seem, I think if you had told someone that 10 years ago, it would seem random, like, why Germany? It's not exactly the place that every like teenage American dreams of like backpacking to in Europe. It's a hard language. Soccer is very much a middle-class sport in North America, where typically if you're very good at soccer, your parents are like, yay, college scholarship, not, no education for my suburban boy, and send him to Europe alone. But, I guess they have to overcome a lot of hurdles to end up, in Gelsenkirchen at Schalke's academy, or, with Tyler Adams and Brendan Aronson, who you talked about, it is of course easier because they were already in that network of clubs. But Josh Sargent, you name it, some of these players are signing for clubs they've probably never heard of before. And I guess I don't even know how to phrase a question on this, but what is that like? You've also lived kind of on both sides of the pond. And is that sometimes an opportunity for you as a journalist, to speak with maybe youth coaches, or go to tournaments, or watch youth games in the US, and kind of develop those sources and that trust before everyone is knocking on Tyler Adams's door?
Or Fonzie, who I saw playing here in BC Place as a 15-year-old, and had the opportunity to speak to him before that, and now he's arguably one of the best left wingers in the world. It does open a lot of doors, and it helps us grow the Transfermarkt brand in North America, having all these players playing in Germany. And there's a lot. I personally would argue that the only improvement from the Bundesliga, if that's even the case, is the Premier League. When you look at the state of La Liga at the moment, I'm not sure that's actually a better place. But of course, if you have the opportunity to go, and I know, Mari, you are a Schalke fan, so apology. But if you have the opportunity to go from Gelsenkirchen to Turin, like it was the case for
even
Weston
in terms
McKennie.
of lifestyle.
It's just that is something, I think the point is rather, you have players that have done very well, that have done well, or some of them have done well, going from medium-sized German clubs to bigger teams, whether that's within Germany or abroad, right? And there's a lot of them. And the good example is Gio Reyna, right?
Right.
Nobody knew who Gio Reyna was. He was this kid playing in the academy for New York City FC, right? Your backyard. And his father, of course, played for Wolfsburg in the Bundesliga, right? But one of the things that I remember when I went to one of the media visits in Dortmund, we got to talk to one of the youth coaches there, and he's like, we watched Gio Reyna when he was 15, 16, and he was already the best player we've ever seen at that age, right? And they were very quick to move for him. and bring him to Dortmund and establish him there. And I think that's where German Bundesliga teams are much quicker when it comes to identifying talent. And the main reason for that is that they financially limited when you compare it to the Premier League, and B, financially austere when it compared to La Liga or Italy, where you can spend whatever you want, you go bankrupt or not, because someone will bail you out, right? That's not the case. Like Schalke, for example, we're very close to going completely under. And in German football, for those who are not aware of that, if you go completely under, that's lights out. No one will come and bail you out. You are going down to amateur football, which now is the 4th division. And that's a reality for a lot of German teams. They have to be very smart with the money that they have. And it's money that they have to earn themselves. There's no rich oligarchs bailing you out or financing your club, right? It all has to be self-generated. So I think for a long time, they've always been very good going abroad and finding players in niche markets and establishing links and relationships with teams abroad too. I mean, RB Leipzig is a great example. They have a network in Salzburg. They have that network with New York Red Bulls. And I mean, that's probably a good question now with Caden Clark. He's the next one coming over, right? Tyler Adams made the step over from New York Red Bulls to RB Leipzig because they already know how to play that system, and they already ingrained with that Red Bull DNA. I remember going to Tyler Adams' first game in the Bundesliga and having him seen previously in MLS. He looked like a player who has played Bundesliga his entire life, right? Yes. So and that's the next thing, opportunity. These players are given the opportunity. When you tell a young American, look, you're going to go over to Leipzig, you're going to play. They don't care about your age. In the Premier League, it's all about experience, size, and all that kind of stuff. In Germany, it's like, if you're good enough, you're playing. If you're 16, you're Jude Bellingham, you're 16, you're playing. If you're Yusuf Moukoko, you're 15, 16, you're playing. If you're better than the 31-year-old, your position in the team is there. And I think young Americans know that, right? And I think one other link that we cannot underestimate is that Germany was occupied by the United States after World War II. And those military forces were there largely until 1994 and still are, right? There's the military base in Ramstein, where Weston McKinney lived. So he already had that connection to Germany. And I think that connection is quite, US and Germany actually have a quite strong connection, right? So that means even though the language is strange and sounds strange, but you go to a modern Bundesliga team there now, they give you the support that you need. Everyone there speaks English. I just had Simon Rolfes on the Gegenpressing podcast, and his English is excellent, right? So like you have a support network that is quite strong there. And again, you know you are going to play. Like look at Joe Scally now, for example. He's right. They signed him last winter, and now he's like a full-on Bundesliga player. So I think that's really what comes into it. There's opportunity there, and the opportunity is given to you. And look, if you're a young American, an 18, 19-year-old, and you're going to the Bundesliga rather than the Premier League, you're going to play in the Bundesliga.
Definitely. That was really fascinating answer. There's so much to bounce off of there. I think we can see from how you describe it why it's so attractive for US and English talents to come to Germany. It's a good infrastructure. The clubs are professional and serious, and they're likely to get playing time. Now, the other side of that, clearly it's risky for German clubs to be bringing someone from, for example, in the case of Matthew Hoppe, when he came to Schalke, he was 17. He came from this obscure La Masia Academy in Arizona. And he grew up a very sheltered, happy boy in suburban California.
Right.
And, had a stint in LA Galaxy, didn't quite make the cut there. And it's expensive. It's a big responsibility for Schalke to bring someone from, the Pacific Northwest to Germany's industrial heartland without his family. The stakes there are so high. So from what you gather, how do clubs like Schalke, I know Hannover has recently signed some Americans as well. FC Bayern obviously have a bit of a legs up through the cooperation with FC Dallas, or Dortmund, how does that work? Do they just see the US youth national team play and are like, oh, I like the look of the right back. Let's bring him over. Tell us about that.
I mean, Matthew Hoppe is now playing at Mallorca, right? You can argue whether that move is good or not for him. I think that's yet to be seen. And in Reyna's case, the academy has housing, where the players live and they get educated and quite integrated into the place that they live in. Bayern Munich's campus, famous campus, I know there were some issues there in the past, but I got to tour the facility just before COVID broke out, and man, it's world class. It's like a university campus with a mini stadium and all that kind of stuff. And Chris Richards, of course, had a very successful time there, and is now playing on Hoffenheim. And I think he was just voted Bundesliga player of the month, or defender of the month, or Hoffenheim's player of the month. He's doing very well, and probably has a long-term future even at Bayern Munich. Justin Jay is going to be the next. They're going to do everything in their power to bring him back to Bayern Munich. Nagelsmann is a big fan of him. Ricardo Pepi has been heavily linked to Bayern Munich as well, including Bas. And I know that Bayern Munich would like to bring him in. Whether that's the best move for him, I mean, that has his family and Bayern Munich and all these people around him have to decide that. But they are good in integrating these players and making sure that they're comfortable. And I think the opportunity vastly outgrows the risk, because
right.
I mean, at the worst case, they're getting a very good football education that they can take back home with them, right? And you see players not quite making it in Germany and then going back to Major League Soccer and playing a few years there, and they can take that to. I mean, we are now at a state now where if you don't make it in Europe, Major League Soccer is a good league now. It's actually a really good league now. People still poo-poo it and say it's not a good league, and it's like it's not European level. It's not far away from the top 5 leagues anymore. It's not a top 5 league, but it's getting there. Some of the clubs that play in Major League Soccer now are very good and have very good facilities and do a very good job at fostering the young players that are coming through the system. And the worst case, you don't make it over there, you can always come back and play for very good money here, and then maybe make the step again a couple of years down the road. Like going back to Major League Soccer is not the end of the road anymore. The league signs younger and younger players, and with an eye to sell them in the future. So like Major League Soccer is not a retirement league anymore. So I think for both sides, there's quite a lot to gain there from, because at the worst case, you're going back home and you're playing professional football. I mean, that's still pretty good. It's the risk. I think when you look at the generation before that, when you look at the Eric Vinaldas, the Tom Dooleys, those kind of guys, Alexi Lalas, for them that was quite a risk. Tyler Dwellman, who was with 1860 second team for a while, the fallback option wasn't quite as secure as it is now, right? Because you didn't make a lot of money playing in MLS back then. It's like 50,000-60,000 for most of the players. You didn't become a millionaire playing in Major League Soccer, but now you can. And I think for that alone, it's always, it's not as big of a risk for these young players anymore. And most of the time it works out. I mean, I can think maybe of 2 or 3 players where it didn't. Ulises Lanes is one example, who was at Wolfsburg, a very promising young player. Didn't quite cut it there, and not because he wasn't talented enough, but there was some other issues going on. Sometimes, you can't integrate. And then he's now back in North America. So, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And maybe then it will work out in the future. I think the opportunity far outweighs the risk.
Right. I mean, you touched on MLS really raising the bar, and the fact that very few players make the jump. And then, look at, Julian Green is not a good example because he was in Germany before, but he's an established professional footballer now. He gets the occasional call up to the national team. Yeah. He played at Stuttgart, Greuther Fürth, Hamburger SV. And you can say that, he's had a very solid career. He scored in a World Cup. And there are more like where that came from, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And my question, I believe, would be, why are Americans so successful, and why do teams, I mean, it's like they're fighting each other now to put a footprint. You have Eintracht Frankfurt and Schalke establishing academy cooperations transatlantically. Of course, Bayern at the forefront with FC Dallas. And you have these like licensed camps that clubs are doing, clubs touring North America now. Alphonso Davies, of course, was a big deal for Canadian soccer, him going to Bayern and making it. I mean, I remember when that signing happened, everyone was like, oh, Hassan Salihamidzic is just crazy to spend 10 million on a Canadian, you know?
It's the best deal he made.
That's definitely, that's like a, one of the big badges on his armor. So what is it? Why is it so? Is it like a school system thing? Are the academies getting better? Is it just because the country is so large and diverse? I mean, is there like a secret sauce?
I think the mentality is quite close to German mentality too. That determines to. It's very professional. Athletes in North America, you know this. You work in other North American sports as well. There's a high level of professionalism that is expected of you in the Bundesliga as well. I think when you look at the level of professionalism, the Bundesliga is very different than some of the other leagues where you can maybe get away with some stuff. And not for Bundesliga clubs, signing a North American is safe because you bring over someone like Tyler Adams, he's going to sit down, he's going to do his studies, he's going to cook for his girlfriend, and he's going to play football. That's it. No scandals, nothing else, because he's a consummate professional. And that's what you get with most North American athletes. You get consummate professionals. And I think German clubs value that very highly, right? If you sign a young US boy, you know what you're going to get. And you're going to get a kid who's only going to want to play football, nothing else. So there's that. And I think MLS, you mentioned the corporations. Hoffenheim has a cooperation with FC Cincinnati. I know at least 2 other Bundesliga teams are close signing cooperation agreements with Major League Soccer teams. I'll break those news when I'm allowed to. But it's like, I know this stuff is happening, right? And there's good reason for that because like there is so much untapped potential. There's 330 million Americans. Now, so I think it's even more. There's 30 million Mexicans live in the United States. Mexicans live in the United States. They all play and watch football. That's a huge amount of kids that you can tap up and bring over before they become world stars. And I think Bundesliga teams have just recognized that there is a place there that you can find these players. As for Canada, same thing. In Canada now, football is the most played sport, more than hockey. There's more clubs registered now, youth soccer clubs now, than there's hockey clubs. And not just now, this has been the case for more than 10 years now, and it's coming to the forefront now. Canada's national team is actually really good. They have a very serious shot at qualifying for the World Cup based on talent alone, because it's not just Alphonso Davies. You have Tajan Buchanan is going over from Major League Soccer to Bruges. He's a fantastic player. He's not going to be in Belgium for very long. You have
I saw him at the Gold Cup and I was like
brilliant player.
Really
good player. And he had chances. He could have gone to Augsburg as well, and there will be a spot for him maybe in Germany down the road. Jonathan David is probably one of the best strikers, if not the best striker, not playing for PSG in Ligue 1. And again, a player who a lot of focus on it. Kyle Larin and has done really well in Turkey, and we're probably going to see him in a bigger league at some point as well. And there's a lot of young talent still coming through the various academy system. There's now a professional league separate from Major League Soccer in Canada as well. Like one of my neighbors here is Rob Friend, who used to play in the Bundesliga. He has a very successful team in the Canadian Premier League, Pacific FC, who are first. And they're doing a great job bringing in more and more talent, giving young Canadians playing time. So again, that's another market that is growing. And so, people ask who's the next players to come through in Canada that you think will be hit in Europe. Tajan Buchanan, for example, right? I think he's going to be a superstar there. And there's a lot more to come. I think we can be very excited in this part of the world, not just with the US, but also with Canada, with what's coming, which is great for this region. We're essentially the three biggest countries having the three biggest national teams. It used to be always just US and Mexico, but if Canada can replicate some of that, I think that'd be good for North American football in general.
Definitely. Now back to the old continent.
Yes.
We have a question here about a team we haven't touched on yet, and quite unfairly, to be honest, because they're currently joint up top. They're only second based on goal difference. And that is, of course, Bayer Leverkusen, who won very impressively 4-0 this weekend and have one of the best strikers from the Euros on their books in Patrick Schick, and one of the biggest French talents, which says a lot for France, in Moussa Diaby and Florian Wirtz, which is incredible to me that he's like the heir apparent to Kai Havertz, where Kai Havertz is like 3 years older. But like, this is the question we got, and I wonder what you make of this one.
It's funny, that was actually a big talking point in our gegenpressing podcast this week, which will be out tomorrow. Nice. I got burned really badly 2 or 3 years ago saying Leverkusen will win the title, and it didn't happen. I think Leverkusen have a very good squad, and I think the game 2 weeks from now against Bayern Munich, it's at 9:30 Eastern time on Sunday, right? AM, AM, 6:30 AM for me. It's going to be brutal. 3:30 German time Sunday. But yeah,
you should just put the beer and the coffee ready on the nightstand, in like a mini fridge.
I usually actually make the coffee the night before, so it's like I just have to turn it on when I get up for early games like that. It's like being on the West Coast covering the Bundesliga can be very hard at times. So it's nice that I'm actually able to go back now every once in a while, because it's much more humane. But Leverkusen, yeah, I think there's a lot there. They did some really good business in the transfer window. I was really impressed by that. By Pierre Hincapie was a defender that a lot of clubs were after, right? And they ended up getting him for a very good price. And same with Kunusu, another very good defender. Everyone always focuses on all the attacking players, but they signed 2 of the most in-demand defenders in a market where defenders are very hard to come by. And they ended up getting 2 out of the most in-demand ones, which is just remarkable. Simon Rolfes does a very good job there, identifying players and getting them, and doing it with some very interesting approaches. And we had him on the gegenpressing on our last show. We had him in an interview and talked about scouting and all that, and which I thought was very fascinating. And they do very good work. And Florian Wirtz is such an amazing player. As he said, he's already kind of more than filled the boots that Kai Havertz has left, and you wonder where that team's ceiling is. Sione, the head coach as well, he seems like a very smart, measured man, and is getting quite a lot out of the side. There's always just that but with them, isn't there?
Vizekusen.
Yeah, like it's like the Neverkusen, as they say in English. It's just like, is this actually now? Is it finally? Do they finally have it all together? Because they seem to be always so close, and then they have this one result. Like last year, they were so close to the top of the table, and then Jonathan Tah scores that late last minute own goal, right? And like, this season just goes down the drain, and then shortly after Peter Bosch gets fired, and it's just like another year wasted. And I personally want to think they're for real, and I want them to challenge for the title, because I do think that despite that everything is going on, Bayern Munich are beatable. I mean, they did lose the last match, and the top of the table is very tight. I mean, RB Leipzig, with the horrible start that they have, are only 6 points behind Bayern Munich at this stage, right? Because usually at this point of the season, Bayern Munich have 21 points out of the first 7 games, and then now they have 16. So they have already dropped 5. And Leverkusen are right there with them. And if they beat Bayern, or even just take a point off them, I think that will say quite a lot of where they are with this group of players. Because this group of players gets a result against Bayern Munich, who else is going to beat them? I mean, they were really good in the Europa League as well. I mean, I think everyone who covers German football is like, yeah, but it's Leverkusen. Right?
Yeah, it's kind of like as if, not to step on any toes, I know we have a lot of fans, but it's as if Arsenal suddenly was like making a run at it, and everyone would be like, but it's Arsenal, like they're gonna come fourth. If they have a good year, they'll come fourth. So yeah, it is a little like that. Interesting. I really like that question, and thanks for sharing that. And as our listeners probably know this, but straight after the international break, so in less than 2 weeks, that's that title, and Leverkusen and Bayern, they're at the top, joined at the top, neck to neck, both on 16 points, and they're going to be playing each other for basically the number 1 spot. So if Leverkusen wins that game, they're number 1 in the Bundesliga. So watch out for that. Now we are coming up to the hour mark. Thank you so much for bearing with me, Manuel, and everyone watching. I'm going to take one last listener question, because I think it's a really happy one to end on. And that one comes from Carla. I'm going to blend it in now.
Bundesliga team to support. How much heartbreak do you want? You mean you can go take the easy route? I made one mistake in my life, and only one mistake. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, I grew up in Munich, and my dad was watching a Bayern Munich game. I think it was in the European Cup, so the predecessor to the Champions League. And it's like, oh, Bayern are quite good, but who's your team? But who's your team, Dad? And he's like, well, I grew up an 1860 fan, so I'm an 1860 fan now. And I wish he had said Bayern at the time, because it would make my life a lot easier. So it depends how much heartbreak you want. I mean, if you want the easy route and you want to win every time, like you could support Bayern, but where's the fun in that? There's quite a lot of very well-run teams. I mean, Marie is a Schalke fan. She knows my pain.
Stop saying that. I mean, it's like, I feel like this season I've just been ignoring it, because I'm like, my team doesn't even play in the league that I cover, and it's like TV channels don't even show the matches because they're so unworthy.
It's for the better though. It just saves you the heartbreak.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah. But pick a few. Why don't you suggest like 2 or 3 maybe for Carla? Apart from
Leverkusen are fun. I want to say Bayern Munich is the easy one, but sometimes it's fun to watch them as well. Lots of people like Köln, even though like it seems like every neutral supports Köln, so maybe don't go for them. It's a very good question. Borussia Mönchengladbach is another one that I think team with lots of history that is very supportable. They like what they're doing. You can also just, if you want a little bit of heartbreak, but also win everything every once in a while, you could choose Borussia Dortmund. I actually have a good team, but just be aware that every year you're going to lose your best player, probably to Bayern. And I think there's, in fairness, I think that it stopped that pipeline now. So, but yeah, why not? Hertha Berlin. There's another one.
What?
Lots of heartbreak there. Eisern Union Berlin.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just really depends on what you're looking for. I think that's.
Maybe we'll make a little quiz. Why don't we have a joint Transfermarkt release Bundesliga minutes release like a
one of those thingies. Test. If you like this and this and that and that, and then you end
go
up...
left, go
I know. I'm in your hands. Yeah. You know who always, and I think that's really a safe bet. They always play great football every year. Is Bayern Leverkusen. They're not always successful, but they do always play great football.
since I was little, to be honest.
Yeah, always.
And they
Always
always
have
had
played great
absolute
football.
ballers. Like
Yeah.
they had like Lucio, the Brazilian. They had I'm blanking on the name. The fullback who then went to Real Madrid.
Yeah.
Carvajal.
Yes.
Was it Dani Carvajal?
Yeah.
Then they had Chicharito.
Mhm.
And it's like, I think Leverkusen is more famous in South America than it is in Germany. Everyone's like, I signed for Leverkusen. It's like, because they've been such a pipeline. Arturo Vidal, he pretty much made his career at Leverkusen.
Emerson.
Yeah.
There's a lot. They used to sign all the Brazilians before they became cool. Yeah, I mean, they were one of the first teams, I think, that did that, because they have like some sort of connection with Bayer, the pharmaceutical company there, right? So they had their foot in the door before anyone else did.
Free drugs for everyone in your village.
Yeah. And I mean, they're very good at talented acquisition. I mean, I mentioned it today, like the young French kid that they just signed, Adli, he was supposed to go to Bayern, and they actually ended up beating them out to him. And yeah, I think, I mean, right now is a great example. Again, like it might not be a success, but boy, the football is good. Right? People like it. I like that too.
Yeah. Now, I like Carl's comments here, because either he's saying your answer was beautiful or that you're a beautiful man. So, either way, you're
it's a win.
in his favor, exactly. Yeah, and the spelling trouble, I mean, try spelling Borussia Mönchengladbach. So, you can go worse. It can be harder. If you want it to be harder, we can make it harder.
I'll do it. Borussia Mönchengladbach is so hard to spell that even the Germans shorten it to just Gladbach.
Exactly, or BMG, like not BMW, BMG. And then there's Greuther Fürth, which you can't spell or say if you're not German. So there's a lot. And actually, that used to be Kissinger's club. He grew up in Fürth before he emigrated to the US and became, Secretary of State. And he's actually, I think it was like 10 years ago or something, when they were last in the Bundesliga, he would sometimes turn up to the games in Fürth.
And the funny story is, the way they found out is because they had some online program, and they noticed that someone from the White House would always log in and watch the games. And that's how they found out that and then they did some research, and they already realized it was Henry Kissinger.
That's a great story. I did not know that. That's wonderful. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. This has been so much fun. Where can people find you? You mentioned you have a podcast coming out tomorrow. Have you got any other things that you would like to tell people about right now?
Well, transfermarkt.us is, or Transfermarkt in general, is where all my work goes. It doesn't just go on .us, it goes on .com, .co.uk, like all the English-speaking outlets, right? So you can find most of my work there. I do about 5 pieces a month for Forbes. I think you do as well, right? So on the Bundesliga, so I tweet that usually. My Twitter handle is @Manuel Veth, so my name spelled together. I hope Twitter is still online. I think Facebook was gone.
Find out in a minute. Yeah.
I'm not on Facebook, so don't even look at me on there. I am on Instagram, but that's just my private stuff. But like, I hope Twitter is still here. But you can find me down there. And I think everything that I do, whether it's this, whether it's on any other appearances that I do, whether it's my Forbes pieces, my Transfermarkt pieces, the Gegenpressing podcast, I all tweet that on my Twitter handle.
Wonderful. Yeah. Awesome. Dankeschön.
Na, Dankeschön.
And I will say Glück auf, because that's my style. You can say Servus or whatever you like.
Ja, Servus, wie man so schön sagt auf Bayerisch.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks so much, Manuel. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Me too.